What is your best drugs story? Back in the day I used to go to lots of raves. This one in particular was in November 2002, in a massive marquee set up in a huge field somewhere in the south of England. At that time I was 17 and experimenting with quite a few different drugs. I can't remember exactly what I was on that night, but it would most likely be a mixture of MDMA, mushrooms, ketamine, and 2CB. It got to about 3 AM and due to the fact it was really cold outside and there were hundreds of sweaty ravers going for it in the marquee, it started raining inside. Yes, all the dirty raver sweat was condensing on the cold marquee ceiling and raining back down. Now even in my inebriated state I knew this was fully rank, despite most of the other ravers taking it as a once in a lifetime euphoria moment and actually catching the drops in their mouths. Massively grossed out by this, I decided to head out in the field and take a walk. Now if you've ever taken 2CB you'll know you can pretty much stare at anything and find it thoroughly entertaining. So I was walking across this field kicking my way through low-lying fog, and absolutely loving it. At which point I decided to take a pee in the middle of the field. Whilst standing there taking a pee and admiring the shapes being made by the steam coming off said pee, I notice what looks like a massive piece of driftwood lodged in the ground sticking almost upright about 10 meters in front of me. I decided to investigate. Once I'd finished my mammoth pee, I strolled up to the driftwood to examine it. It was huge, about the size of a railway sleeper, and properly lodged in the ground almost as if Thor had decided to lob down some wood rather than his normal bolts of lightning. As I was stood debating where this wood had come from in an otherwise empty field, I noticed that on one of the sides there was a tiny red light kinda like an LED slowly blinking on and off. As I was studying this tiny red light it began to move up and down the wood very slowly. I watched it do this many times, up and down, up and down. This really threw me, and I started debating whether or not the wood and the light were really there at all. There's no reason for such a tiny moving light, and where is the electricity coming from in this empty field? Could this be just a ridiculously vivid, but otherwise massively boring hallucination? Then my mate gave me a shout to come back in the tent and I decided before I head back in, I needed to get to the bottom of this conundrum once and for all. So I decided to kick the little red light really hard, as at the time that seemed the most logical way of determining if something was real or not. As I connected the little red light, it exploded into the most beautiful firework display, splintering off into billions of tiny red sparkles, and I was hit with an amazing wave of euphoria. This euphoria didn't last long as it was pierced by a horrible booming voice from the heavens shouting, "What the fuck are you doing?" As I heard this, all the trippiness fell away, kinda like a heat wave shimmer, including the wood and the red light, to reveal an angry geezer stood over his girlfriend, with the girlfriend holding her mouth. The red light was her freaking cigarette. Not only had I taken a pee right in front of them, then walked over and stared at them in silence for what could have been 10-15 minutes for all I know. I'd then finished off by booting the girl square in the face. TLDR, I thought a girl was a magical piece of wood, and kicked her in the mouth to prove it. There were probably 10 of us total, running around inside of a small duplex that I and 3 others lived in. We had all taken ecstasy and were all having a very good time. The night goes on, and my friend Zach asked me if I'd like to go down into the basement with him to sit in the strobe light. I told him that I would be downstairs to join him in a little bit. Almost simultaneously, everyone crashed. I was on the floor, some people were on couches, and some were upstairs, but nobody was downstairs with Zach. The next thing I know, I am woken up by the sound of crying. A male. Sobbing. I started to get up to see what was going on. I saw Zach, sitting and on the floor playing Super Nintendo. I asked him what had happened, and he suddenly got very excited and stopped crying. Dude, I was yelling at you for like 20 minutes and you wouldn't get up. Nobody would. I thought that you guys had all overdosed, and I was sitting here waiting to die. The thing that I find most hilarious was his reaction to us not waking up. He thought he was going to die and decided to just sit down and play SNES instead of doing something about it. TL. Doctor friend thought he was going to die, so he sat down and played Super Nintendo while crying. Woke up on an island in the middle of a lake in Denver, completely dry. My phone still worked, so I didn't swim there. Still have no clue how I got there. That was 9 years ago. And you've been there for 9 years? Want us to send you a boat or something? I used to climb buildings in the old downtown of Winnipeg, a snowy city in Canada. We would go up the fire escapes of 5-6-story buildings and smoke weed. One night me and a friend were doing this when all of a sudden I noticed red and blue lights flashing. It was a cop car and I looked over to see 2 officers starting up the fire escape. My friend freaked out and started climbing down a pipe that ran down the opposite side of the building. It was wobbly and I had no intention of adding my weight to it. The police were almost at the top. I don't know what I was thinking, but I ended up at the ledge, and when they crested the ladder I turned to look at them and said, "Stay back. I'm gonna jump." They immediately became very concerned and placating, and I let them talk me down after 5 minutes. They took me down the fire escape, and when we got to the car the officer let me sit in the front. He showed me how the computer worked while they drove me home. Everything went better than expected. Waiting online with friends to go into a rave. We were all tripping before we got in. The front door security was handing out little pieces of paper with disclaimers written on it, basically saying, "Drugs are prohibited, there is a zero tolerance, blah blah blah." The guard is telling my friend to read it. My friend kept saying what, and the security guard kept repeating, "Read it." Eventually my friend shrugs and puts it in his mouth and eats it, thinking that's what the guy is telling him to do. The guy just shook his head and let us in. We get inside, hysterically laughing at the situation, my still confused friend. It was great. Took shrooms by myself one night back in college. Plug in the headphones and go dance in the athletic fields listening to music, tripping balls. Then I decide to go into the woods. It's really just a few trees separating the field from the highway, and I decide to climb up a birch tree. I'm in the middle of a conversation with this tree, trying to convince myself to fall out of the tree on purpose, when I hear someone coming. 2 guys walk into the woods and make a drug deal and then decide to sit down and smoke weed together not 20 feet from my tree. Mind you, this is a birch tree, so it's white, and I'm in a black hoodie, jeans and black Sambas on, and it's a full moon. I try to stay as calm and quiet as possible, start thinking about being one with the tree to blend in, hoping they don't notice. Then suddenly one of them flips out, falls on the ground and is like, "WTF?" Then, them, "Hello?" Me, hello." Them, "Are you a cop?" Me, "Nope." Them, "Oh, okay. Want to smoke with us?" Me, "Sure." "Want to help me out of this tree?" Them, "No." Me, "Oh. Okay, I'll be right down." Then I climb down from the tree and smoke up with these 2. The dealer is a sophomore and the other a freshman. I was a junior at the time. After that we walked back to campus and saw Nowl on the way. And we awkwardly went our own ways and never saw them again. But I heard stories from some friends about people seeing a weird dude in a tree at night by the fields. Got really baked at my friend's home. She has 3 floors to her house. She decided to go all the way upstairs, and I was about to follow her when I noticed one of her cats was at the bottom of the stairway. Awesome. I'm going to pick this cat up and bring it to the top floor. Suddenly another cat shows up. Both are so cute and I cannot decide which one I want to bring with me upstairs. And then, a 3rd cat appears. All 3 are staring at me with a curious look. I'm staring right back at them, trying to decide which one I should bring upstairs. Fuck it, they are all coming upstairs with me, those cute fluffy bears. At that moment her sister walks in and asks me what on earth I was doing. I was stacking the cats. One cat on top of the other cat on top of the other cat. Like some sort of a cat sandwich that I was planning on carrying to the 3rd floor. The cats must think I'm weird. Was home for the summer and reunited the old gang to go camping at the beach. Later into the night we were all pretty drunk and stoned when someone suggested that we'd go for a swim. At that moment we all stripped off naked and ran hooting and howling into the great black sea. So we dive in and it's freaking freezing, but you slowly get used to the cold. It was then that we noticed that our thrashing was causing the water to glow vibrantly. We quickly realized that it was the fabled phosphorescence which we had learned about from our shared favorite book, Alex Garland's The Beach. It looks kind of like this, but upon closer inspection you could see that it was thousands of tiny organisms giving off light when they moved. We stood there marveling at it and playing with it for a while. Then my friend said, "Really wish we had a J-bomb right now," at which point another friend, the designated roller, came marching into the sea like freaking Poseidon, arm aloft, keeping the holiest of holers dry. And it was the best joint I could have hoped for. TLDR, sometimes going swimming in the cold deep Scottish blue is worth it. Once upon a time a couple friends and I did acid in my apartment. At the time I had a disassembled television on my living room floor that was being converted into an aquarium. This being so, there were also a lot of tools laying on the floor. I thought about how I should put all of this away before we dropped, but didn't. More on that later. Starting the trip out at a friend's house was fun, but as he was not participating it was a bit strange, so we decided to go back to my apartment. I tried to open my front door but the acid was kicking in and I forgot briefly how keys worked. I panicked and ran back to my friend's house. I explained my situation to a girl I barely knew. I gave her my keys and my phone number and she said she would call me when she got into my apartment. Eventually she got in and I got the call. I went home and I swear I was in that apartment for at least an hour before I realized that nearly every object I own, freaking pickle jars in the back of the fridge, was turned upside down. Things settled down and the trip is going well. A friend of mine is sitting in the middle of my living room floor cross-legged. He hasn't spoke for a while but I was tripping out and didn't realize. What happened next seemed to come at me in slow motion. I see him at one moment sitting in silence with his eyes closed and the next moment he has a hammer in his hand, is screaming, and swinging over the head at not only my dismantled television, but also my working television. Boom. Both televisions smashed and my buddy and I are screaming in terror. Now if you've ever had the pleasure of smashing a CRT, you know that a plume of phosphorus flakes fill the air. There were now 2 large televisions worth of phosphorus flakes in the air and we were all freaking out at my friend. After what seemed like forever we calmed him down and decided it was best to return to my friend's house and deal with the mess later. We convince crazy friend to put his shoes on and prepare to leave. He doesn't quite realize what he has done yet. We open the door to leave and he fucking ninja dives head first down the staircase. Boom, he's gone. I'm now running around the neighborhood, tripping my balls off, looking for my friend who's even worse off than me. We call other friends who are also looking for him. We split up. About 30 minutes later I alone find him. It's night at this point and I see my friend as a shadowy figure in the distance on the other side of the street. He is wearing no shirt, his pants are ripped to shreds and he has several dozen deep cuts across his body and is bleeding profusely. I approach him but he's so far gone he doesn't recognize me. Not wanting to startle him, he's a freaking ninja and could probably kill me with his bare hands if he wanted. I approach slowly. I try to reassure him and direct him to our friend's house. It's me, Angle, let's go, relax, okay. He only grunts, he's that far gone. I get him to our friend's house and we give him some crayons to color and he rides out the trip. Now the kicker. It turns out when he dove from my apartment he ran into one of my neighbor's yards and dove through a bunch of rose bushes, tearing his cloths and cutting him. He then walked into someone's back door thinking he was home. The homeowner found crazy bleeding man in his kitchen but remained calm. My friend then takes off all of his clothes in stranger's house as an offering because he thinks he is being judged by Satan. Hands stranger his shirt and wallet and pants. Stranger gives friend pants and gets him to leave. That's when I found him. Next morning friend realizes what he has done and goes to apologize to stranger. They are now Facebook friends. TLDR. Friend does acid, smashes 2 televisions, breaks into stranger's house. Now they're Facebook friends. Saw Soundgarden open up for Guns N' Roses on New Year's Eve 1992. Yeah, I'm old. Took so much acid that I spent 3 hours looking in the opposite direction as the stage. Ripped my baseball cap to shreds. Best part was the crazy guy who was dancing a few rows away. Everyone was laughing at him. He wasn't even dancing to GNR. He was dancing to some celestial rhythms that only he could hear. When he took off his clothes he really became the center of attention. Folks are laughing as security approaches. Everyone laughing saying OMG that dude is out of his mind. What is he listening to? As they carried him away all I could think was man, I am hearing the exact same tune that he is dancing to. Yup. I also get the Brain song. For me it is a slow techno beat with what sounds like 1000 tiny dwarfs yelling hi ho. This is my best drug story because it finally made me realize I couldn't do drugs anymore. It was March of 2011 in Queens, New York. After being clean for about a year I found myself strung out on heroin again but managing to hold a job. It was payday and I got a $1,400 check which I took directly to the bank and cashed. I decided to skip out on work early because I was starting to get dope sick. I went to a friend's house that I met at rehab who lived about 2 blocks away from my job. I call a cab and it brings my friend and I to the dealer's apartment in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The dealer knows we want 4 bundles of heroin and 10 dimes of crack. We pull up to the place and I hand Shino $430 and he gives me a plastic bag containing the drugs which I tuck into my boxers. We get back to my friend's house and I prepare my shot. The bags of heroin were stamped One Love which we had received a week prior and it was pretty weak. I think I shot about 20 bags in a day when we last got it. I decided to do a 3-bag shot as my initial dose seeing as how weak it was last time we copped. I mixed 3 bags in a spoon, dropped a cotton in and pulled the dope into my syringe. I tied off and found a vein on the first try. Most of my veins are fricked up so I felt lucky to hit so quick. As soon as I pushed down the plunger I felt the most intense rush I've ever felt doing drugs, and I am a tried and tested heroin junkie. I immediately said holy frick as I pulled the needle from my arm and blacked out. Fast forward 40 minutes later I wake up on the kitchen floor staring up at 2 uniformed cops and 3 EMTs. I had my first overdose. The friend called them and flushed all the drugs when I collapsed. I was blue when they got to the house, and they gave me Narcan which snapped me out of it. I was taken to the hospital and observed for 5 hours then was released. I got into a cab and copped 2 more bundles of heroin in Harlem and slept on a park bench, occasionally walking to a nearby McDonald's to shoot up. I made it to work on time at 8 AM that morning. After this I decided to kick dope and drugs altogether and yesterday was 5 months clean. Good luck staying clean. Upvote for a different type of story here. There are good drugs and bad drugs, and I'm always happy to hear stories of survival from those who made it out of the bad. Keep clean, brother. Crack and heroin equals suicide. 3 hours blowjob after me and my ex ate some MDMA. You have no idea how much everything in the world pales in comparison to this. I went skydiving a few months after this whole event took place, and I distinctly remember as I was plummeting to the earth thinking the thought, this is awesome and all, but it's number 3 hours blowjob. Did you take her to a musical beforehand? TLDR. Did mushrooms in Germany in what turned out to be a cemetery and crematorium. I was being a tourist and decided to visit Leipzig on a detour. I climbed to the top of the Wirtschaftsdenkmal which is one of the tallest buildings outside downtown Leipzig. I had a bunch of shrooms and was scoping a place to take them from atop this viewpoint. I saw next door a beautiful autumn park and monastery with a bell tower. I decided that's where I'm shrooming and proceeded to devour the batch. I took my time down the monument, continuing to be a tourist, and made it to the park perfectly on time. It was so beautiful. The sun was shining and the weather was so clear and warm. I'm putting my shroom face on and I'm starting to stroll and gaze when all of a sudden I see a tombstone and another and another. Oh my god, I thought this is a cemetery. What a beautiful place to rest in peace. It's so full of life. I continued to make my way to the monastery, and when I got there I could feel the shrooms kicking in. It was such a beautiful building, so richly decorated with many gorgeous carvings. I'm taking photographs of every possible inch. After a few minutes I'm getting curious as to what the hell is this place. Can I see more of it? I want to see the view from the bell tower. So I start acting like an American and pushing on random doors like I own the place and can walk anywhere I want as I please, but the doors are locked. The shrooms are kicking in, I'm finding it a bit weird to walk straight, and my vision is starting to warp. It was at this time some crowd walks up to me with the biggest smile on his face and says to me, "Tot bist du, don't translate just yet. The fuck? Bitte wiederholen, please repeat." Again he comes at me with, "Tot bist du?" Is there something wrong with my German? He cannot be asking me this. Auf English, bitte in English please. He then points me to the office and everything made sense. The logo on the door said crematorium. Tot bist du means are you dead? I had walked into an active crematorium in Germany. There were people dressed in black and mourning their loved. While here I am, an American on vacation, taking photographs, big smile on my face, frying balls on mushies. To twist a hunteress. Thompson quote, "Jesus, what a terrible thing to ask a man with a head full of shrooms." Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment.